Employment for me began really when I was at school and I was approached by my headmaster who asked me what I'd like to do for the future. I knew at that time I loved maths and I had a special skill at it really. It's something that my mum was quite aware of. I also had an interest in a machine called a comptometer. And nowadays this would be known as a computer. So the comptometer evolved into the computer over time. My mum knew about this as well, and so I told my headmaster that I'd quite like to become a comptometer operator. My headmaster seemed quite pleased by this and he took me to a factory in Burton-on-Trent, which is where we went to the offices and I was able to see a comptometer operator at work. It was fascinating to see this machine in work and I was quite pleased. When I left school, I then met a missionary called Reverend Crellin. And he didn't really know much about my background and he didn't know me at all. And he seemed to ignore my idea of becoming a comptometer operator. I remember he took me to visit a firm in Worcester, a famous factory called Kay's Catalogue. And they did clothes and such like. And we went there and he took me to the offices and told me that I'd be responsible for the photocopying duties. I wasn't interested in photocopying. I wanted to become a comptometer operator, but he didn't really understand where I was coming from. So I went home and I talked to my mother and my mum wasn't happy. And the two of us, we went to, I forget the name of the place. It was like an employment office. It was missionary of the something. I can't really remember the name. Anyway, myself and my mum went there and we met a lovely person and he gave me an interview and talked to me about becoming a comptometer operator. And they said, first of all, I needed some training. And they told me I'd receive this training at a college in Exeter. The college was called St. Louis, and it catered for students with various disabilities. They offered me 3 months training course there, and along with that, they offered me travel and accommodation for free for the duration that I was there. My mum was quite upset about me being away from home again, but I remember she came with me on a visit to see the college. And it was quite a nice college. It seemed like a lovely atmosphere. There was various students there with degrees of disabilities. It was a real eye-opener to me. Everybody seemed to mix well and there was even some deaf people there. It meant that I was able to make friends easily. I enjoyed the college life there. I should have only been there for 3 months for the training course, but without any interpreters, it meant that progress was slow. We were taught about how to use a comptometer. I was one of 3 deaf people in the group, along with hearing people who had various disabilities. It was a small group and I enjoyed studying with them. Eventually, it was agreed that my stay would be extended to 9 months. But I enjoyed the college life there. It was lovely. And I was only 16 when I joined.
My first real experience of work life was probably when I was about 14. School was always teaching, oh, you must work, become responsible and so on, and I did. When I started work life, I thought, wow, this is what it's like. There's money, responsibility, loads of stuff. And it was also great to use those long boring summer holidays for something useful. But one of the problems was I had to start at 7 o'clock in the morning until 5. Every day it was the same. So I'd have to leave home about 5:30 in the morning to take 2 buses to get there, work all day, finish at 5 and get home about 6:30. But you know, work was good, the experience was great and there was money. But I realised looking around, there's people there in the 30s, 40s, 50s who've been working there for about 20, 30 years, the same job but no promotion.
My first job was actually working at the fun fair, and the reason for this was my family were travellers. My first job at the fun fair was a bingo caller. Also, during the winter time at Christmas, I also was in charge of selling the candy floss, and also toffee apples and all sorts of things really. So I did both of these jobs from about the age of 7 to about 16, 17, and then I went to college. Over the 10 years I have run my business, I have faced a number of difficulties and challenges. I have noticed that I seem to have more deaf clients than hearing, and have always wondered why. When I first started my business, I knew I needed to make contacts. The use of a minicom wasn't known to many, and I didn't really use emails then. But now I use emails regularly, and some people don't even know I'm deaf. They'd ask if they could phone, but I'd say, sorry, I'm deaf, so please continue emailing me. At the start, when I wanted to get contacts, I advertised in the Yellow Pages, but nothing came about from that. It all came down to word of mouth from families to friends and thereafter, and through emails and the internet. I think people were reluctant to use a minicom or just didn't know how.
As a deaf person, I do feel I face challenges in the workplace. Firstly, communication, and secondly, English. In terms of communication, sometimes for my job I have to give talks to hearing audiences, and they sometimes ask me to do a talk the following week, but for booking interpreters I can't do it on that short notice, so I have to postpone the dates. For my hearing colleagues, this is no problem. In terms of English, I work for the Royal National Institute for the Deaf, and sometimes it means dealing with strategies, policies and procedures. And although I have a good grasp of English, I sometimes read words that I've never seen before. And sometimes the jargon is just so complex that it goes straight over my head. So yes, I have had to learn the business jargon in order for me to understand my job better.
With regards to training opportunities and promotion, currently I am managing a deaf prison project based at BID, Birmingham Institute for Deaf, and Services for Deaf People, where there is a great need for training. Recently, I completed a management training course with a fellow manager, and I believe we did the training for 6 months. Also, like many other individuals, I've needed training for equal opportunities, health and safety, and a wide range of others. There's plenty of training opportunities within the BID.
I originally wanted to train as a nurse, but the college that I wanted to attend in Manchester wouldn't accept deaf people. So I started researching into becoming an occupational therapist, until I realised that it wasn't something that I wanted to do. Somebody suggested to me becoming a chiropodist, so I had a look at the syllabus and I realised I liked what I saw. I then had an interview at Birmingham College, and they approved and accepted me on a 3-month probation.
In terms of training, there wasn't much out there at that time. But having said that, the first time I did have a go at carpentry, there was 4 of us, 3 hearing and me, and we went to what was called then day school. You also had evening school. Nowadays you'd call it college. Right, so I went along, but it was of no use to me, because I was sat too far at the back. If I was closer it might have been to some use, but no, it was too far at the back, it wouldn't work. But what I did do, I went and bought myself a book. Because I was quite a good reader of English, so I did that. I bought myself a few books, and sometimes I'd also pop along to the library and get some out of there. So I'd have a read about woodwork, the basics, how to get started, the different things that were involved. And, in terms of carpentry, I'd read books about that and cabinet making as well. So I learnt a lot from those books. And when I actually went to work, one thing I did notice was sometimes I'd see people being handed their notices, whereas I was never handed my notice. I must have been a better carpenter than all them. But it did make me think, maybe it's because I was so focused on my work, while they were all busy fooling around. In terms of health and safety, going back to when I used to work for GEC, it was in no way as high as on the agenda as it is nowadays. When I first arrived at work, all they told me was, oh, when that red alarm goes, that means it's a fire, and things like that. So I thought, right, well, my colleagues know I'm deaf, so when a fire alarm does go off, they'll just give me a tap and let me know if I'm working. Oh, come on, it's time to go outside. But one day, as I recall, I think I was going to the toilet. So I'm sat down, as you do, reading the paper. when my boss decides that, he wants to have a fire drill. So he ushers everyone out of the building and starts to do a head count to see who's there, and he realises, oh, the deaf bloke's missing. So what do I do? How do I let him know? So my manager totters off to the toilet and gets a piece of paper and writes the word fire alarm. And gets down and passes this piece of paper under the toilet door. So I'm sat there thinking, what's this? And I read the word fire alarm. So I'm thinking, oh, I'm halfway through, what am I going to do? I'm sat there. So, I get myself together and, I didn't even have time to wash my hands. I'm thinking, oh, health and safety. So, this is my life. So, as I'm going out, I bumped into my colleague and says, where's the fire? He says, oh, it's only a drill. I thought, oh, great. Talk about being caught short. They were all laughing. So wonderful. I never even had time to finish the toilet.
The employment choices of the past and the present are very different. In the past, deaf children were prepared to work in specific occupations, such as a carpenter, a cobbler, a tailor, or a housemaid. But now in the 21st century, there's a wide range of occupation opportunities for deaf people. We now have deaf individuals working as window cleaners, lecturers, sign language teachers, dentists, astronomers, scientists, dustbin men, and more. It's so different from the past. I feel the reason for this is the wide range of choices and the provision of sign language interpreters through access to work. Access to work really has built up deaf people's confidence in applying for work that they really want. Over the years, the workplace has changed for me. When I first started my job, all I had was a basic drawing board, ruler, and pencil. We didn't have emails, a minicom for a while, or mobile phones. But now I've got everything I need, which makes my job so much easier. Emails and a mobile phone. From when I first started to now, the workplace has definitely changed. The reason for the changes has been my job role. For about 20 to 30 years, I worked as a designer. I designed bridges, and most of the work was on my own. There were occasions where I would ask a colleague if I was unsure. From there, I became a manager, where I was responsible for repairs and a wide range of duties. Due to this change, I needed more interpreting access. It's difficult to compare these jobs because as a designer, I spent a lot of my time on my own or one-to-one, whereas as a manager, I worked with groups of people. It was different, but I don't feel it affected me. I seem to have moved on at the right time.
I have experienced discrimination within the workplace. I feel I was discriminated against by my line manager. They would regularly tell me that my work was good and so increase my workload. Eventually, it became overwhelming. In comparison to my hearing colleagues, it didn't seem fair. With my work, it involved a lot of paperwork. And if I had a problem, I would go to my line manager, but they wouldn't listen to me. I would try to explain, but they would just say, let me finish. Because they were hearing, I feel there was a real communication breakdown. However, if my line manager was deaf, I think they would have understood my problems much easier. Not only did my line manager not listen to me, but their manager didn't listen to me either. I think it's because they didn't really understand much about British Sign Language. I did have another boss who had some level of understanding, and it was much easier, but my line manager had nothing. They were very firm and wanted everything their way and thought they were right all the time. So we went back and forth like this for a while. It wasn't very nice. If they'd have just listened to me, they would have understood that I was just trying to tell them the criteria needed regularly updating. But I just couldn't get through to them. It was really difficult, and eventually I felt so discriminated against I lost all of my confidence.
My first occupation was as a sewing machinist in a factory that supplied baby clothing. I was really good at my job and my duties involved piecework, so I needed to always concentrate and make as much as possible. Often I would see my hearing colleagues nattering away and doing very little work, unlike me. Anyway, I worked really hard at my job. When it came to payday, I was always puzzled by the amount shown. It was far lower than what I had done, and I knew I should have earned more due to the amount of work I had made. Compared to my hearing colleague, who would chat and be very lazy, I knew I had worked harder than her. I wasn't satisfied, and so after 12 months of working there, I went to find another job.
I remember one problem at work, a while back, with me being a deaf person, because I used to work as a carpenter. Anyway, every tea break there'd never be any hot water left in the kettle. So one day I went and filled and boiled the kettle myself, and when I'd made me cup of tea, I threw the rest of the water down the sink. My colleague came over and said, "Oh, where's the hot water?" I said, "Oh, make your own." He said, "Oh, what's with your bad attitude?" I said, "No, I explained for ages, you've left me out. So, I said, "Right, that's it, I'm off." I says, "You can explain to the boss yourself if you want." He says, So I put my coat on, got my bag, and left. He said, "No, no, no." I went, "No." So as I'm walking off home, next thing, the boss pulls up next to me. Says, "Come on, get in." So anyway, I gets in the car and we drives over to his house. So he sits down and has a chat, and I explained to him all about the tea situation, what happened. He said, "Oh, leave it with me." So he goes back and has words. Problem solved. From that point on, I didn't have any issues with them.
Within the workplace, I've never felt I've needed to be a member of the union, as my employer CAB is good to me. My managers are very proactive and listen to any problems I incur. They are happy to go through them with me. I have regular reviews, performance reviews, and they are happy to discuss anything. Their door is always open, and I can approach them at any time. I send emails to them and have regular meetings. I always feel encouraged, and if there's an opportunity for promotion, they will find the right training that I need. I'm never stuck in the same routine. Promotion is available all the time.
Well, in terms of support from the union, it just wasn't there. I'd been making these weekly payments for ages, just in case, I needed support from them in case I was discriminated against. I could go to them for their backup. But they didn't offer any support, really. They provided an interpreter, but it just wasn't enough. I'd been paying these payments for ages, and I just thought, oh, this is typical. What's going on? There's no support there. It was an absolute joke. So, really, I was expecting from the union equal opportunities, access to work, communication, but nothing.
When I worked at Wade's, they would tell us what we needed to do, and they would bring these huge trolleys that had individual shelves in them with various items on, and we had to work through them a piece at a time. They all were placed on these big boards, and we had to pick up these boards, put them to our workstations, and once finished, put them back. And it was such hard work. When I left Wade's, I went to work at a factory called Roll Dalton, which already had a system in place. Once we finished our work, we would put them into a box and onto this conveyor belt, which would be taken away. There was this young boy who was a ware carrier, and he would fetch the work to each station. We didn't have to fetch the work ourselves, the young boy did. And whenever I finished my work, I would shout to the boy and he would fetch me some more work to do. I wasn't required to do any moving or lifting, I just had to remain in my workstation. We worked on a piecework rota, which involved various work, which meant that the work was evenly shared. No one had one job better than another, and each of us had the opportunity to earn more money on an individual basis. Some people were very fast workers, and for others that wasn't so. I worked as a freehand pottery painter. painting cups, saucers, and plates. This technique was to use dry powdered colour and turpentine oil. I had a tile and I would mix the dry powdered colour and the turpentine oil together with a knife until it became a smooth consistency. I would dip a paintbrush into the turpentine pot, then into the coloured pots, and I would paint and fill in a plate that already had a flower printed on it. It was compulsory to have a selection of colours: red, blue, yellow, and green. You would use different brushes for the different colours. The smell from the turpentine oil was disgusting. The turpentine was also kept in a mug. On one occasion, I had a mug of tea on my work desk. I was busy looking for something, and I went to grab my mug of tea, but instead I grabbed the turpentine mug and drank it and spat it out immediately. I didn't place my mug there again.
So just before I was about to leave school, my headmaster asked me, "What would you like to be when you leave?" I said, "Oh, I'd like to be an engraver on things like copper, wood, and pottery." But he said, "Well, your woodwork, my secretary tells me you're very good at carpentry." But inside, I wasn't too keen to accept that, but I did. So then I went to my first job, that was in Hanley, and that was as a bench hand joiner. So I stayed there for about 1.5 years or thereabouts. And then I went to a different firm where deaf people actually worked there as cabinet makers. So I certainly gained a lot more experience from there. And I think I was there for, about 2 years altogether, and that was through the wartime.
I attended Mary Hare Grammar School, where I completed the necessary schoolwork to gain my qualifications and A-levels. As a result of this, I considered working as an architect. My youth employment officer spoke to the deputy at City Architect to give me the chance to work there, and they did. I worked there for nearly 25 years. To gain training, I had to commute to and from college once a week, so I worked 4 days and attended college 1 day a week. I didn't have an interpreter or note taker during my studies. I had to rely on the notes made on the board, the lecturer's notes, handouts, or by copying from fellow classmates. During this job, I was never promoted, even though I had professional qualifications, an HND, and I was a member of the British Society of Architectural Technicians, a professional body where I pay a membership fee. I often asked if I could be promoted, an increase in wage, but they said that I wasn't responsible enough. They knew that communication would be a problem on building sites, but in actual fact, I had no problem. I was able to instruct workers, speak to my foreman, carpenters, bricklayers, electricians, plumbers. I incurred no difficulties. The manager's main concern was for my safety. I felt it to be rather patronising.
My work involved enamelling, and you had to learn to paint very carefully and put the numbers on each pot, and I started this job at the age of 16. My deaf friend, Kathleen Bauer, unfortunately she's died now, but she worked with me, and I was so pleased to work with another deaf person. Sometimes whilst we were working, we would chat more than we worked, and as a result of this, I was moved to another part of the factory, and I had to keep away from her. Anyways, I continued my work as a painter, which involved piecework. I didn't really enjoy it. It was during the wartime.